we have to solve this problem of trust. Like that's the thing that I see as that is the biggest factor that could really damage us as a global society is this inability to trust one another. And as we start to see a proliferation of this technology, it's going to erode trust more rapidly, and we've got to come up with some guardrails around that. Um, and this isn't like LLM guardrails. That's not enough. This is like deep in the CPU guardrails.
Hi, this is your host Olin Bhartiya and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. Today we have with us Aaron Fulkerson, CEO of Opaque Systems. Aaron, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you today.
It is my pleasure to host you here today. What is Opaque Systems all about in this world where we see security is kind of crowded space, sticky space? What unique value Opaque is bringing to the market?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share about Opaque. So Opaque provides the enterprise with the ability to build what we call confidential data pipelines that they can build AI applications on. So what is a confidential data pipeline? This is data that is encrypted, not just in storage or in transit, but at the time of processing. So the technology that Opaque invented at the UC Berkeley RISE Lab with some of the same creators of Apache Spark and Ray, which went on to become Databricks and Anyscale, the same group of co-founders or some of the shared co-founders invented a new technology that allows companies to build confidential data pipelines, allowing them to have trusted AI because you have proof that your data is kept private, secure, and you retain the sovereignty of the data.
What kind of unique challenges LLMs are creating for organizations? Because everybody has to tap into data. We are generating a lot of data. But what about the data privacy when it comes to LLMs and GenAI?
The same challenges that enterprises face with data and AI before generative AI have only become exponentially more challenging with generative AI. And what I mean by that is the companies that we're speaking with consistently tell us that they're having difficulty getting their AI projects from pilot to production. And that's pretty important, obviously, especially considering that in 2023, the total AI market is estimated to have been at $200 billion with a 37% compounded annual growth rate. Now, if you look at the number of AI projects, and I'm using AI broadly from analytics to machine learning to generative AI, if you look at the percentage of AI projects that went into production in 2023, most estimates have it between 3% to 10%. So what's the root cause of companies or enterprises' inability to achieve a return on investment from their AI projects? Well, they have to get the pilot into production. And the number one sticking point is concerns about their data. Now more than ever, people are very concerned about data because at the same time as Gen AI is becoming the next most important super cycle in human history for technology, maybe the most important, you have a cultural super cycle around an inability for people to trust companies and organizations, stemming in part from high-tech companies mining and refining personal data. So the challenges of AI are still the same with generative AI. The only difference is that it's become exponentially more challenging as we move from traditional AI to generative AI.
Are there any specific risks which are associated especially with GenAI and LLMs, or you will still say that no, that is still the same, nothing is changing just because we are talking about things like ChatGPT and LLMs?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely specific ones. For example, if you're an enterprise looking to take advantage of a generative AI implementation, it's your data where the value lies. Now, that means using your data in conjunction with your generative AI or LLM implementation. So two approaches are being used. One is fine tuning of the LLM model with enterprise data. And we've seen a proliferation of data leakage of training data coming out of the LLM. So that's a really significant concern because that data is the company's proprietary information and commonly includes customer data that has personally identifiable information that has to be kept confidential. The other approach is using prompt augmentation. RAG is one of the more common ones. This means that the enterprise's data is being used at the time a user writes the prompt, really invisibly to the user. So let's say that you're a wealth management advisor for a wealth management firm and you write a prompt, you're assisting a customer around tax advice. So you write, I'm helping Tracy Garcia, she's asking for tax advice. What happens is the prompt then goes through what's called RAG, where multiple data sources typically, it's not just one vector database, commonly in enterprise, there's multiple data sources are queried to augment that prompt. And behind the scenes, that data has, where does Tracy live? What are her accounts? What are the balances? What are her gains and losses? What's the proprietary playbooks we're running with Tracy? That then gets passed to the LLM. The LLM processes it and returns a response, something like, well, tell Tracy to sell off her tech stock losses, harvest those tax benefits, and purchase maybe some of these ETFs that are aligned with her propensity to buy and also our investment playbook. So what just happened there was all manner of confidential proprietary data as well as private data was passed around, or potentially it was used to train the model. In both of these scenarios, there's data leakage that can and has been proven to occur. So companies are stalling their LLM implementations because they need to have absolute certainty that their data is kept private, secure, and the one that comes up the most common is their sovereignty, meaning that they own the data and it's not going to be used by another party who's going to build AI features that disrupts their business. So that's what I mean by it's always been a concern around confidential data or private data or proprietary data in AI. But now more than ever, as we see these LLMs proliferate, it's becoming a real roadblock for enterprises to get value from AI.
While we are seeing a lot of adoption, but it's early stage. At what level of adoption? Mostly we do talk about chat GPT like kind of things, images. Of course, a lot of security companies, they have started integrating, but the caveats are there. And looking at the caveats that you also talk about, what is the balancing act where they can leverage these, this data, they can also leverage, these Gen AI LLM technologies without compromising on whether it's data sovereignty. And data sovereignty can mean different things. It could be companies very valued data, or it could also be because of regulation. In Europe, there are a lot of laws there. So what is the balancing act? What tools, what technologies, what solutions are there, or what approach is appropriate?
Some of our founders at Opaque, who are PhD and one a professor at Berkeley, who are quite renowned globally in security and AI, have produced a white paper that enumerates all of the various techniques that people can use to secure their AI implementations, specifically GenAI. There's a real focus in this white paper on the GenAI. Now, I'll start by saying anonymization is the current standard technique that people are using. They're hashing their PII, they're anonymizing their data in some manner. This guarantees that you will leak data, period. Because one, there is no anonymization scheme that's 100%. It will undoubtedly mean that some data is leaking. Here's an even more important point. There has been a proliferation of research on how generative AI can be used to de-anonymize data. De-anonymize data. So this is going to be a huge issue because with new AI models, it is quite easy to de-anonymize data that's been used as part of these projects. So there are techniques that can be used. There's a variety of them that we outline in our white paper. And they are foundational technologies, everything from federated homomorphic encryption. It goes through the pros and cons of that, performance being the principal con, all the way to how we approach it at Opaque, which is using what used to be specialized hardware. Chip manufacturers started releasing hardware enclaves in their silicon. There's a technique in computing called confidential computing that takes advantages of these hardware enclaves. I said it used to be specialized hardware, but now every chip manufacturer produces their silicon with hardware enclaves, allowing one to do confidential computing. And this is what Opaque, which some of the founders at Opaque, not only did they help invent Spark and other foundational um, AI and data technologies like Ray and Spark, but they helped pioneer the category with Intel going back eight years ago. So that's the technique in which Opaque built a software stack on top of. But the white paper doesn't just focus on that technique; it enumerates all of them and the pros and cons of them.
Will it be possible for you to quickly give an overview or some highlights of the white paper which touches on some of these problems?
The key thing that I think it's important to understand is the technologies that are used to ensure security and privacy of data are uh, it's easy to go and get really nerdy about like encryption and different schemes for encryption and how do you process data while encrypted with AI. But personally, I prefer to focus on what is the business value here and why is it important to companies? Well, the business value is I go back to where we started this conversation, which is if the estimated total market size for AI in 2023 was roughly, I think, 196 billion, so just shy of 200 billion, and somewhere between 3 and 10% of projects went into production of that investment, that's a real lost opportunity. So there's a lot of hype and excitement about generative AI, but if you cannot use it with your most valuable data, which guess what? Your most valuable data is data that's private or sensitive or proprietary or customer data, then you can't get the value out of AI. So the key point here is while there are multiple techniques outlined in the white paper and in technical detail too, the key point is this is really about solving the business problem of making sure that your business isn't disrupted because some other player in the market is able to get their AI projects into production and tune their AI projects more rapidly than you can. I'd like to keep it more about the business problem. And then in terms of what the white paper enumerates in various techniques, it's everything from, as I mentioned, federated homomorphic encryption to different anonymization schemes to confidential computing and a couple of others that frankly are completely new to me that I was unaware of too, which I would feel uncomfortable even going into. But the key point is, by focusing on making sure that our businesses are able to deploy new technologies using the most valuable data that we have available, which is this private and sensitive information, is what the white paper is helping folks to achieve.
How much awareness is already there in clients? As you already mentioned, the enterprises, they are hesitant in embracing these, but where do you think we are in the journey that organizations need to know about these challenges, or they know about the challenges but they don't find the solution, so that these white papers are helping build those solutions so the organization can start leveraging these new LLMs, GenAI technologies without compromising on data privacy?
Technologies for ensuring data is kept secure, private, and your sovereignty is retained that are outlined in the white paper. None of them are new technologies. Homomorphic encryption, confidential computing. These are technologies that go back a decade. What's different is the demand for them just increased dramatically because everybody adopting AI is an existential imperative for businesses and organizations. The success of your company over the next 3 to 5 years is going to depend upon your ability to adopt AI within your organization, like period, full stop. So these techniques all of a sudden became really essential to business operations. And because of the easy access to these incredibly powerful large language models, which can de-anonymize data and also, uh, without even malicious intent, tease out personal data from conversations with individuals. This is the old techniques of anonymization are just grossly insufficient. We're going to look back on how people did it and go, like, oh my God, I can't believe that we actually thought that was acceptable. Um, and as you pointed out earlier in this conversation too, there's regulations already today, like GDPR, CCPA. There's a variety of different regulations that the use of anonymized data don't actually meet the requirements of those regulations. But because everybody's been doing it, the regulatory bodies are just kind of like, well, they haven't taken action yet. They're focused on like the larger organizations, like the Meta, like the big suit against Meta that just occurred in Europe. But rest assured, they're going to start taking action. They're going to start coming after people with a stick, because once people realize that this data can easily be de-anonymized, it's going to become a real issue.
I do want to ask, if you look at the larger picture, do you feel that the whole Gen AI movement that we are going through right now, is it of the same scale that at one point was a Linux kernel? Linux kernel literally run the whole world, containers, and Docker container came, then Kubernetes came in there, or it was kind of, there have been a lot of technologies, they came up like a blip and then they disappeared. One more thing is that if we look at the whole COVID phase, the reason the world did not came to a standstill was that technologies that were able to run things from home, cloud was there, things had matured. I mean, companies, they quickly switched their model to cloud, and suddenly even food you don't have to worry about. You can order food will be delivered to your home. So things were in place. So I'm not saying that we should look for the next crisis that will happen, but number one question is that what is the scale that you see of Gen AI as compared to some of these technology that we mentioned? Second is that what kind of next world level, if you're a gamer, it will unlock that we have not even envisioned at this point?
This is a great question. If you look at the history of technology just since the advent of the internet, to open source, to cloud, to mobile, um, each one of these super cycles starts with a catalyst. There's an introductory technology that catalyzes people's imagination. What was it for the internet? It was the Mosaic browser. The internet fundamentally changed humankind, but it started with the Mosaic browser. That was the catalyst that then people suddenly had a realization that, oh my gosh, I can do all manner of things on here. It became Amazon and YouTube and all these other things, right? The next one, let's say it's like, the Linux kernel. It was Linux that was the catalyst that led to, was it the open source super cycle or was it the cloud super cycle? Well, open source had to happen first before cloud could happen. And then all of a sudden, the cost to launch a new technology and the speed with which one can do it became a fraction, 1/100th of what it used to be. And then mobile. What happened with mobile? We had mobile phones, but it was the iPhone was the catalyst that sparked human imagination. And then suddenly there was a proliferation of location-based applications and other benefits for humans as a result of it. Here again, catalyst. It was ChatGPT. Never in human history did you see an application or an artifact, I'll call it an artifact, adopted more rapidly by humans. That was the catalyst, but it is still very early days. We're basically in year one. Last year was year zero. We're coming into year one. Everything right now is just like toy applications. Just like when the iPhone dropped, all of those initial applications were toy applications. Now look at how absolutely integral to our life the iPhone is. But make no mistake about it, this is the most significant technology supercycle in human history. And we'll be looking back on it in 5 years going like, oh yeah, remember that year one when it was a bunch of toy applications, just like with the iPhone, and Steve Ballmer laughed at it and talked about how it was just like a gimmick.
I feel that we are so lucky that we are living in a phase. I remember the early days of journalism, like looking back 205. it was like a dark days of technologies. It was just Windows XP and Windows Vista was coming in. There was no innovation happening at that scale. I had the Symbian OS on my, I mean, it was a dead, I mean, as a journalist, it is becoming challenging for me to keep an eye on everything because I cover the whole, all the way from mainframe to Docker container to Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes to OpenStack to, of course, Linux kernel is not a big deal anymore. And then now OpenAI is there, security is there. So is it challenging for us to keep up with everything, but at the same time it's also a very exciting time, because so much new innovation is happening. I mean, Apple just came up with vision. I'm heavily into VR. I mean, this is my studio, but also have a gaming section here. I'm heavily into VR and AR and XR. So in the next couple of years, the world we will be living in, we cannot even dream of. So it's not like, we'll be telling our kids, we used to have a dial-up modems, because they will see this transformation. So I feel that we are lucky to be living in this time. And as a journalist, being able to talk
Totally
about
agree.
that. Yeah.
The one thing I'll say to add, I 100% agree with you. We have to solve this problem of trust. Like that's the thing that I see as that is the biggest factor that could really damage us as a global society, is this inability to trust one another. And as we start to see a proliferation of this technology, it's going to erode trust more rapidly, and we've got to come up with some guardrails around that. Um, and this isn't like LLM guardrails. That's not enough. This is like deep in the CPU guardrails.
Aaron, thank you so much for taking time out today and, of course, talk about this topic. And I would love to chat with you again soon. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.